1974 was a very good year for me, but it was not a good year for Nixon. On the good news side for me, I was living in my first ever house, albeit without furniture, but I was taking woodworking classes to try to rectify that. My university position was moving along quite well. The training program I established for master's degree students was doing very well. My teaching was doing very well. The direct service was doing very well. I had had a few articles published, and the first book that I had co-authored with Jack Lowry was published in 1974. As far as the progress in the male world of academia, let me relay one story. For several years, the university had held yearly retreats with male business executives from Portland and university faculty. This was to mend the rift between the university and the business community. In the spring of 1974, I and two other faculty women who were older than myself were invited to attend what had been this all-male bastion. We got to the retreat center, and this fairly large group was then broken into 3 groups. And you can imagine one woman was put in each group. In my subgroup, they then said, as we gathered, they gave 2 names, and they said, one of you please be the leader, and the other please be the note taker. And they gave my name, as well as another individual who is a male and an executive vice president of a large lumber company. When the group all settled, I looked at the man and I said, "Why don't you take notes and I'll lead the group?" Well, the weekend turned out very well, and at the end of the weekend, this man came over to me and he said, "I want you to know this is the first time anyone has ever done that to me." And I think he meant the first time any woman had done that to me, and then asked if I might talk to his daughter about attending the University of Oregon. Women's rights continued to march on in 1974 when Congress outlawed housing discrimination and credit discrimination on the basis of sex. And by the way, when I bought my house as a single woman in 1973, I had no difficulty doing that. Nixon's life went from bad to worst in 1974. By July 27th, the House Judiciary Committee passed the first of 3 articles of impeachment charging obstruction of justice. On August 8th, 1974, Nixon resigned. I recall seeing the paper that day. I think at that time the Eugene Register Guard was an evening paper, and I thought, I better save this. And I did, and I put it in the pantry for several years. On September 8th, President Ford pardoned Nixon and all of the charges related to the Watergate case. It was over. Later in the month of September 1974, I turned 30. My 20s were over, and the events of the 60s, which lasted into the 70s, were over as well. For me, the decade had been very good. Looking back, I doubt very much if the 60s had not occurred with the civil rights and then the women's rights movements. I don't think that my career and my thinking would have gone as it did. It is said by some that if you remember the 60s, you didn't really experience it. Well, I've tried to remember the 60s, and it has been both sobering and revealing. At the end of 1974, I had no idea that the decade of my 30s would bring such highs and lows. But that's another story for another time. Goodbye. I've certainly enjoyed this.